Hello friends, welcome back to the Aquilani History Podcast. I hope you've had a good week so far. It's been a bit of a mixed and tough one for me on this end for a variety of reasons, but it's all okay, we move. I really do hope things are easier for you on your end, and if not, just remember, the shadows prove the sunshine. Just chin up and the sun's beautiful rays will touch your gorgeous face soon. We are continuing on the history of Warri in this series. Thank you for sticking around till episode 4. If you just join in, then lucky you, you can binge. So far in the series, we have seen Warri pick up and abandon the international slave trade and get good on some of that sweet palm oil trade. There is anarchy in the land currently though, after Olu Akengbua and 2 of his successors die shortly after him. This gives rise to 2 powerful rival families, but this constant state of anarchy has threatened British commercial interests in the region, and a consul has been dispatched to remedy the situation ASAP. We will also be finally meeting the famous Olomo and his even more famous son, Nana. Welcome to episode 4 of the Red Rivers, Warri, Trade Politics, War, and the Merchant Princes of the Niger Delta. Episode 4, the Leopard Banner. Let's dive in. This was still reflecting this period of anarchy which lasted for 3 years after Oba Akengbua died and 2 of his heirs after him. There were still lots of attacks against European merchants. So in 1851, Consul Beecroft finally arrived in the Oil Rivers to bring peace once and for all. He thought he might be able to achieve this by helping with the installation of a new Olu, because things fell apart after the center did not hold. He reasoned that Ebrimoni, Dollar's slave, who had been collecting Komi and was powerful in his own right, would make a good choice for a king. Anyways, expectedly, the surviving sons of Akengbua rejected the idea almost as soon as it was formed into words. It was unheard of for a slave to ascend the throne. So these same princes of Akengbua, Inude, Shekiri, and Usele, could not select amongst one of their own to be king because none of them was preeminently more wealthy or powerful than the others. They were young, they were scattered, they had no slaves, as many had been born after the illicit trade had been outlawed. So having found no success in Ode Shekiri, Beecroft returned to the Benin River for further consultation with the 2 great houses, that is, the Royal House of Emaye and the noble house of Ologbosiri. However, to his utter disbelief, he discovered as soon as he arrived at the Benin River, Dollar's son, Chanomi, led some members of the royal faction of Emaye of the South Bank to raid the factory belonging to Horsefall, a British merchant. The disrespect. Beecroft was livid. It was one thing to raid British merchants, but for the act to occur when the representative of the British Crown was around, spoke of just how highly he was regarded. He had to create an impression, so he ordered Chanomi's town of Bobby to be shelled by his warship and destroyed as a reprisal. Consul Beecroft, having bared his teeth to good effect, proceeded to summon to the decks of his warship a meeting of the great houses to select one amongst themselves to be a representative or governor of the Benin River. If finding the king was proving futile, then at least from among the rich and powerful houses who control trade, perhaps a point of focus and leadership would help calm the unrest and disorder. Unfortunately, and not unexpectedly, the members of the Royal House of Emaye, to which Chanomi belonged, were either worried or annoyed, or both, to attend. One of theirs had just been chased in rather humiliatingly, and from the same naval vessel that they were being invited to. So they boycotted Beecroft's meeting. In the end, only the house of Ologbosiri attended, and they selected from amongst themselves Diare, the younger son of the Uwangwe. Thus he was proclaimed the governor of the river in 1851. A period of peace seemed to finally settle over the troubled waters of the oil rivers. Palm oil flowed along the channels freely to the factories along their banks. It was the aim of any man worth his salt in Ishekiri land to learn the trade of oil, to recruit men and slaves to his house, establish and control new markets in the hinterland, where he would get his steady supply of oil from the Urubu producers. The whole setup was very capital intensive, and family members were often bound together to form a house of firm. Many chiefs and merchants founded their towns and villages on the banks of the Benin. They had transport canoes capable of carrying several tons of oil, as well as war canoes complete with cannon, with which they used to defend their transports and intimidate rivals, as well as the Urhobo oil producers to meet up with their targets. Like I said, this business was not for the faint-hearted. One had to have the "I don't want peace, I want problems always" mentality before applying within. The whole system was fraught with disagreements. There were disagreements on payments. Friction would arise when the river merchants had collected credit or trust from the European merchants and passed it on to the Urhobo oil producers, but the agreed targets from the producers were not being met. Conflicts also arose amongst the Ishekiri merchants when they felt a rival had incursed into their territory and established a market in their sphere of influence. The river governor tried as much as he could to arbitrate local disputes. More often than not, the Ishekiri merchants handled it amongst themselves with an age-old system called chopping, where people and property will be seized with the help of their slaves to pay up for any debts that was owed. No need to bother the governor, when I can simply chop you. If you can't pay, we'll take it away. In the matters involving a European party, however, that is either European versus African or European versus European, the governor had no jurisdiction or authority, and issues would have to be settled by either the consul or an agent of the consul, who was often a European merchant themselves. So you can imagine which way most of the matters would be adjudicated. The consul expected Diarry, the governor, to keep the peace and ensure protection of European interests, while Diarry's fellow Ishekiri merchants expected him to be a representative of their own interests. I imagine that it must have been a difficult role to balance, especially as both groups often had completely opposite interests. There was relative peace during Diarry's governorship. There was an incident, however, where one of the chiefs raided a European factory to recoup his debts. The British Navy got involved again, but the said chief had skillfully barricaded the entrance to the creek that led to his village and inflicted casualties on the attacking ship. This tactic was noted by some of the Ishekiri merchants, and one of them will use it in their playbook in the future. Diarry remained governor until his death in 1870. It was time to select a new governor. Determined to maintain the balance of power between the rival houses, the governorship was rotated to the royal house of MIA. Chanomi, Dola's son, whose village was shelled by Beecroft in 1851, was chosen to be the new governor. He wasn't actually the richest or most influential trader on the Benin River at that point in time. There was one person who had unrivaled wealth and power at his command, and this was Olomu of the Igboshere house. And even further eclipsing him after his death will be Olomu's own son, Nana. Olomu was a grandson of Eyimisaren, the Ologboshere or prime minister who held office during the reign of Olu Akengboa. Olomu was born and lived in Warri for a while, but moved with his mother to Jakpa on the north bank of the Benin River. He traded oil on the Benin River, and through his hard work, grit and cunning, amassed a considerable amount of wealth. He was well respected by fellow Ishekiri and Europeans too. The consul MacLeod had this to say about him: the only chief having the intellect and a force sufficiently organized to keep peace in the river was Olomu. Olomu, as was expected of every serious merchant, founded his own town about a mile up a creek that fed into the Benin River. This town was called Ebrohimi. There, he built up considerable defenses and a flotilla of several hundred trade and war canoes. He is said to have been fair and generous, but also ruthless when he needed to be. He was never shy to go toe-to-toe with any of the main rival houses. He famously fought with Orishemone, the important royal prince. Olomu had admittedly crossed into the turf of the royal princes and gone to open up a new market in the Warri heartland. This was an area considered to be under the control of Akengboa's princes, but it seems that Olomu forgot to read the memo. To send a clear message, the royal princes, at the behest of Emone, their guardian, ambushed Olomu and his slaves on their return to the Benin River. In the ensuing surprise attack, Olomu had to disembark from his canoe and escape overland back to his own town, Ebrohimi. He spent no time licking his wounds though. He amassed his own forces and sailed right back to Orushemone's own village. He attacked it and he destroyed it. There was only one message to be heard in all of this: the princes want to fight me? Well, fight these tears. What? Because Olomu's gonna give it to you. That was a very sad attempt at DMX's song, isn't it? Anyways, even Chanomi, the governor, had experienced both sides of Olomu. Olomu always adhered to the instructions from the governor and observed all trade blockages and embargoes against Europeans, even to his own loss. because the orders came from the office of the governor, Chanomi. However, Chanomi felt the sting of Olomu's ruthless power on one unfortunate occasion. There was a certain European trader who was owed a huge debt by the late King Akengbua. In an attempt to force payment from somewhere, this European merchant had ambushed one of Olomu's sisters, seizing her wares and holding her hostage. Olomu, fearing for his sister's safety but unable to challenge the European directly, went to Dola in Warri. Dola was the matriarch of the royal house of Emaye. She was the daughter of Akengbua via Emaye and mother of Chanomi, the governor. Olomu asked her to repay the debt owed by her father to the European merchant so as to secure the release of his sister. However, Dola got offended and informed her son Chanomi that Olomu had disrespected her. The governor Chanomi subsequently mustered 100 war canoes and set upon Olomu's forces in battle. Chanomi was, however, soundly defeated, and his own personal canoe was even sunk in the melee. By 1879, the consul deposed Chanomi as governor because he had on various times held up all trade on the river. The consul appointed Olomu as the new governor, but accounts vary, saying he was never fully confirmed, nor did he receive his staff of office before he passed away 4 years later in 1883. So the richest of the Ishekiri oil merchants, Olomu, had died. And unusual for his time, he made sure he passed all his wealth to just one of his sons, Nana, whereas the tradition would have been to distribute his wealth amongst his sons. The elders and chiefs were thus asked to meet and choose a new governor, and Nana, son of Olomu, was elected as the new governor. Nana was to Olomu what Alexander the Great was to Philip of Macedon. Both fathers were badass with big plans, but their young sons were intelligent and badasser. In Nigerian parlance, baddest. So born in 1852, Nana was a younger son of Olomu, but he displayed uncommon intelligence for his years. He learned to speak English and acted as translator for his father. He also acted as defense counsel for his father and was appointed as one of the commanders during his father's several battles. He was long before Olomu died regarded as Olomu's lieutenant and heir. He was a clever chap, he was well liked, and he had a sense of style. In fact, his birth name wasn't Nana. Eriomala was his birth name, and Nana was a nickname because he was just too cool like that. His personal boat was ordered from the UK, and he had his name emblazoned on the side. That with his flag, of which there were two variants. The more jazzy variant of his flag was a golden yellow background with a Union Jack inserted in the canton. That's the top left of the flag. Small vexillology term there. Anyways, we learn every day. So basically, golden yellow background with the Union Jack in the top left. And across the top in very big, bold, deep blue letters is the name Nana. And below which is painted the image of a naked black man shooting a bouncing leopard. Drip, drip. He often emerged in public covered in really expensive beads and corals. Now, this may sound a bit extravagant, but it was important to showcase wealth, especially when dealing with European merchants. The richer you are or appear to be, the more trustworthy you were thought to be, the more likely they were to do business with you because you would require less trust or credit. So not only did he have that drip, he further organized his father's slaves and wealth. He saw off competition and established a near monopoly over an area of 6,000 square miles, stretching past the Benin, Ethiopia rivers deep into Urubuland, where oil was produced. No one moved any products in this zone without his knowing or blessing. He was so rich and powerful that he needed no credit or trust from the European traders. His trading boats are said to have boldly carried banners stating "No trust." I imagine his servants, when asked by the European merchants, "Are you sure you don't need any credit or trust?" Though they've probably gone, nah. And that's because we work for Nana. Please don't groan in dismay at that. So Nana had a fleet of 100 war canoes, supporting and protecting his massive transport fleet of over 200 canoes. Each war canoe was manned by 36 rowers and nearly 40 soldiers armed with muskets. He had well over 5,000 slaves and war boys. Some estimates put this as 20,000. And he had a personal guard of 20 of the best trained war boys, kitted up with state-of-the-art Winchester rifles. He must have made such an impression with all of these overt displays of wealth, power, organization, and oil riz. I mean, gone were the days of the palm oil ruffians. It was now the era of cultured businessmen, the OG oil tycoons at the very top of a ruthless empire. The maps of the days even showed billiard and pool rooms in the Ishekiri kingdom. I mean, just imagine Ishekiri chiefs with their top hats, lace tops, and expensive wrappers shooting pool in billiard rooms. Nana also had a belly full of that ruthless fire possessed by his father. He waged campaigns against the Ijaw pirates and nearly single-handedly eliminated the problem in the 1880s. His head slaves would establish new markets and mark a radius of 3 miles, demarcated with glass shards, and any producer or trader in that sphere had to bring all their oil or produce to that market to trade. The Europeans also aided and abetted his monopoly. I mean, it was easier for them to negotiate with one person, especially if that person was a reliable supplier and needed no credit, thus freeing up more of their capital to trade. In fact, the older British firms joined in this monopoly not only against other Ishekiri middlemen, but also against newer and smaller British firms. You see, these younger and smaller firms had been trying to break into the oil market, but being prohibitively expensive to set up, they made no inroads until technology started to catch up. So newer steamships were being built in Britain, replacing the older, slower sail ships around the 1860s. The old business model was profitable because the British trading firms also owned their sail ships. But now these new streamers were essentially like transport ships, which made multiple journeys every year, and the new merchants only needed to buy cargo space without needing to own the entire ship. The newer British firms, as well as some German ones, were also trying to find a way to get into the Urhobo hinterland, to get directly to the source of palm oil produce. They tried to do this by the Forcados River and the interconnecting small waterways through Warri and Patani. If they succeeded, this would mean they could break the stranglehold of the bigger firms and Ishekiri middlemen on the oil trade. They'll be able to bypass the middlemen, making the Ishekiris redundant. This will also make the bigger British firms redundant, because the newcomers will have access, direct access, that their older comrades did not, and they would in turn form their own monopoly quite quickly. So the old money European chaps dragged the smaller firms to the court of equity that had been set up to settle trade disputes amongst Europeans, and basically coerced them to sign a document involving the Ishekiri traders as well, banning all trade at Warri, with heavy prices to be paid if anyone was caught trading outside the Benin River and any other old established points of trade. The British Navy also backed his decision because it would have been more difficult and expensive to patrol and protect any merchants traveling really deep into the hinterland. So in this business, as you can see, there's no permanent friend, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. What a role, guys. I keep enjoying each successive episode better than the previous one, and I really can't wait to release the next one next week. Big shout out to all of you who've been listening across all different platforms, my new friends on YouTube, and all of you guys who've reached out so far. Thank you for your very valuable time, comments, encouragement. I really appreciate it. Please remember, if you haven't already, to follow the podcast on whichever platform you listen on. Do send me some feedback or suggestions. I'd like to hear what you think. Please share and listen in with your friends. It only takes a minute, and it really does go a long way in supporting me. Have an amazing week ahead, and remember that despite the blows, life really is an amazing piñata with lots of sweets and colorful confetti inside. Stay well.